Of all the different types of dynamics that I work with, one common disconnect that happens across the board is when people make assumptions instead of ask questions. This can happen in your personal life, your professional life, even your political ideology, when you make assumptions instead of ask questions. Now, let's talk about assumptions for a minute. First of all, it can be something as simple as, I didn't think you needed this anymore since you left it laying on the counter for 3 days, so I threw it away without asking the question. That can lead to a conflict, a disconnect, frustration, but also in professional situations where you seemed really stressed, and I know that this project is a huge undertaking for you, so I assumed you need help, and I'm jumping in to do this for you, which could actually cause more stress for the person who's taking on the project because the question wasn't asked. Would you like help with this? Is there something that I can do to help alleviate your stress? Yes, leave me alone. Great, done. That's what I'll do. But the question was asked instead of the assumption was made. Also, when we make our assumptions based on limited knowledge, are we taking our information in from just one source instead of the source? And if you're not able to ask a question directly to the person involved, maybe it's the president of the company, maybe it's the political leaders, and you can't just call them up and ask the question, hey, can you clarify this for me? Because there's a lot of things being said about it. If you can't do that, are you taking in your information from multiple sources and then deriving at a decision? Or maybe it does have to be an assumption at that point, but is it an educated assumption instead of just going off from limited exposure, limited knowledge, one source of information? If you are asking your mother about your sister because you're trying to figure out Thanksgiving plans or something like that, then you are getting limited source of knowledge instead of going to directly your sister and asking, hey, what's the situation here? Maybe you make an assumption, oh, Aunt Mary doesn't want me to come because of this and this that I did in the past. That's an assumption that you're making instead of asking the question directly. There's so much disconnect that can come from the assumptions made, especially when you're basing those assumptions on your own personal process. Oh, I would assume that they would schedule this in if it was important to them. That's not a correct assumption for somebody who has discipline low and adaptability high. That's never going to be the case for them. But if you make that assumption, there's going to be a disconnect because you're not asking the question. And sometimes you have to ask clarifying questions, follow-up questions to really understand what it is that you find yourself making an assumption about. So hopefully today, especially with some high emotions that are going on, if you are basing what you think is going to come down the pipeline on assumptions of what has been given to you in terms of information instead of waiting to see what actually happens, what behaviors really turn out to be like, what policies are made, then you can have your clarification and proceed accordingly. But until those things actually happen, you're causing yourself a whole lot of stress right now based on assumptions that are made. And the same thing goes through as we're going into the holiday season. If you're making assumptions about family members, instead of asking questions, you're going to cause yourself a whole lot of disconnect that might not need to be there. Now, when you ask the questions, you also have to prepare yourself. You might not get the answer you're looking for, but at least you know. And you're not just assuming that somebody would think something or behave in a certain manner because that's what you think they would or should do.